Influence of foreign languages on English. At the end of this video, you will be able to understand the following topics: Introduction to Old English language, borrowed words from foreign languages, influence of foreign languages on English, influence of Christianity on English language, contribution of Indian languages to English vocabulary, impact of foreign languages on English, pros and cons on the influence of foreign languages on English. English is a West Germanic language that originated in England and is now spoken as a first or second language in many parts of the world, including the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and many countries in Africa and Asia. It is a member of the Indo European language family, and its closest relatives are German, Dutch, and the Scandinavian languages. The English language has a rich history with roots dating back to the 5th century when Germanic tribes migrated to England. Over the centuries, the language has evolved and changed with influences from Latin, French, and other languages. Today, English is the third most widely spoken language in the world after Mandarin Chinese and Spanish, with over 1.5 billion people speaking it as their first or second language. The English language is known for its vast vocabulary, complex grammar, and wide range of dialects and accents. As a result, learning English is considered a valuable skill that can open up opportunities for personal and professional growth. Without the Old English language, English wouldn't be survived. Old English, also known as Anglo Saxon, is an early form of the English language that was spoken in England from the 5th century to the 11th century. It is the language of an epic poem, Beowulf, as well as many other important works of literature from the period. Old English is a Germanic language and it shares many similarities with other Germanic languages such as German, Dutch, and Scandinavian languages. However, Old English is also distinct in many ways with a unique grammar, pronunciation, and vocabulary. Old English was heavily influenced by Latin as well as Celtic and Old Norse languages, and it went through many changes over the centuries. The earliest form of Old English is known as Primitive Old English and dates back to the 5th century. This form of the language is very different from later forms of Old English, and it is difficult for modern speakers to understand. Over time, Old English evolved into what is known as Classical Old English, which was used from the 9th century to the 11th century. This form of the language is closer to modern English, and many words and phrases from Classical Old English are still in use today. Overall, studying Old English is a fascinating way to gain a deeper understanding of the history and evolution of the English language, as well as of the cultures and societies that spoke it. Borrowed English words from other foreign languages. How has English language borrowed words from other foreign languages? English is a language with a rich history of borrowing words from other languages. This is not surprising given its evolution and the fact that it is being influenced by different cultures and civilizations. The English language has been influenced by various languages throughout its history, including Latin, French, German, Dutch, and Greek, to name a few. The process of borrowing words is called loanwords, and it is a natural phenomenon in the evolution of language. Loan words are borrowed from other languages when there is a need for few new words to describe new concepts, ideas, or objects. The borrowing words may occur in different forms, such as adapting the original word to the phonology of English, retaining the original word but modifying its meaning, or even adapting the word to an entirely new usage. One of the most significant sources of loan words in the English language is Latin. Latin was the language of the Roman Empire, which had a significant impact on the English language. Many Latin words were borrowed into English during the Middle Ages when Latin was the language of scholarship and the church. Words like etc., ad hoc, and bona fide are still used in modern English. Another significant source of loan words is French. French has had a significant influence on the English language, especially after the Norman conquest of England in 1066. During this time, French became the language of the English aristocracy, and many French words were borrowed into English. French loanwords include words like chef, cuisine, and rendezvous, which are still in practice. The Dutch language has also influenced the English language, especially during the 17th century when the Netherlands was a powerful trading nation. Dutch loanwords in English include words like cookie, slee, and yacht. The German language has also had an impact on English language, especially in the field of science and technology. German loanwords in English includes words like doppelganger, Schadenfreude, and Zeitgeist. Greek is another language that has influenced the language which we speak today worldwide, especially in the fields of science, medicine, and philosophy. Many English words are derived from Greek, including words like cosmos, philosophy, and theology. Arabic is another language that has had a significant impact on the English language, especially in the fields of science and mathematics. Arabic loanwords in English include words like alcohol, algorithm, and zero. Other languages that have influenced the English language includes Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Russian, and Indian dialects or Indian other languages. Spanish loanwords in English includes words like fista, sister, and adobe. Italian loanwords include words like pasta, pizza, and cappuccino. Portuguese loanwords include words like jungle, samba, and caprina. Russian loanwords include words like stir, babukska, and perestovka. Indian loanwords, especially words from Hindi, include words like yoga, guru, and karma. And from Tamil, we have catamaran and other words which has been lent to the English language vocabulary. The English language has borrowed words from different languages throughout its history. These loanwords have enriched the language, giving it a broader vocabulary, enabling it to express a wide range of ideas and concepts. English continues to evolve and borrow words from other languages, which is a testament to its dynamic nature and adaptability. The influence of foreign languages on English is described in detail in the following part of the video.
As the title states, the presentation will deal with the influence of foreign languages on the English language and look at how or why these languages have such hold on the English language, whilst also looking at some of the examples of the loaned or borrowed words. An introduction before we dwell deep into the topic. English is a language that has been influenced by many different languages throughout history. And one of the major reasons for the heavy influence by foreign languages on English is attributed to the aspect of conquest on England and the aspect of colonization by England. The pie chart presented here gives an insight on the degrees of influence inflicted by foreign languages on English. As you can see, the core of the English language descends from the Old English language brought in during the 500s by the Anglo-Saxon settlers to what would be called England. A significant portion of the English vocabulary comes directly from Latin or through one of the Romance languages, particularly Anglo-Norman and French. But it also derives from Italian, Portuguese, and Spanish, or from other languages such as Gothic, Frankish, or Greek. Most words in English that are derived from Latin are for the purposes of scientific and technical reasons, medical, academical, and legal terminologies. The influence of Latin in English is therefore primarily lexical in nature, being confined mainly to the words derived from Latin roots. While some new words enter English as slangs and most do not, some words are adopted from other languages. Some are mixtures of existing words and some are new creations made of roots from the dead languages. The Norman influence on the English language. The Norman influence on English is attributed to the aspect of the Anglo-Norman conquest on England. Norman words such as castle, cauldron, kennel, catch, etc. are among Norman words which were introduced into the English vocabulary during the Norman invasion. The Norman language also introduces or reinforces words of Norse origin such as mug, which is still in use in England today. The second influence is led by German. The modern German influence in English is down to the two world wars and the inhabitation of English natives in Germany during the wars. Some of the words that were introduced into the English vocabulary is hamburger, Frankfurt, etc. Commonwealth influence on the English language. The Commonwealth influence on English is attributed or associated to the fact of colonization by Britain. The supposedly Indian words relating to culture such as pajamas, bungalows, verandas, jungles, shampoo, khaki, etc. are widely used in today's.
The diversity of culture is a reminder that the history of English is a story of culture during the past 1500 years. The English language people use today went through three stages, namely Old English, Middle English, and Modern English. If people look back to the history of English, it is certain to say that many elements have helped to shape the language. English is one of the most spoken languages in the worldwide, but what is curious is how it gained such an impressive position. As a brief recapitulation of the English evolution, one must start with the present days and consider the diachronic and the synchronic factors that influence the language. The historical moment in the English development that helped the language to spread all around the world was marked by the England's colonial expansion. England was one of the most colonial active country, and English became the official language of the colonies. The colonization of America was an apogee because the international corporations and the Hollywood have made sure that English has remained an international language. In order to understand the evolution of English, one must take into account the following historical events that led to the language progress. The Norman conquest brought with it the Norman French. In the period, the nobility spoke French and read Latin, while the ordinary people spoke varieties of Old English. But since they existed side by side, the two languages immediately began to influence each other. Norman French became Anglo-Norman, and Old English, picking up a lot of vocabularies from Anglo-Normans, evolved into Middle English. Middle English was thus rather different from other European languages. It was partly Germanic and Roman. After the Norman conquest, considering that reading language was Latin, a lot of words from this cultural language were introduced in the Anglo-Norman vocabulary. Looking back in the history, the early period of evolution, the Roman Empire influenced most of the European language, inclusive of the Old English. The Roman conquest of Britain Island in 55 BC brought with it the Christian religion and also Latin. Considering this circumstance, what it is more important to point out is that by means of all major languages of Europe have been profoundly influenced by Latin, not only in their vocabulary but also in their grammar. When considering the role of Latin in Europe, we have to make clear distinction between the spoken Latin of the empire, and the later written language which influenced the standard language of Europe over 1,000 years. The introduction of Christianity in 597 AD brought about immense changes to England in social and religious matters. It also had a far-reaching effects on the English language. It did not only introduce a rich source of Greek and Latin words, but also opened up a new visa for the information of words from native sources. Indeed, Old English was remarkably influenced and enriched by the conversion of English to Christianity. As observed by H. Bradley, about 400 Latin words were incorporated in English after the conversion and before the Norman conquest. Although many of them were not all commonly used, and only a few of them had actually survived in modern English. Christianity has not been historically intertwined with Western civilization. However, it is difficult to decide what its effects were. Through its long history, the Church has been a major source of social services such as schooling. Several universities were founded by the Church. Some historians of science have argued that the Church had a significant positive influence on the development of science. Some of the Church priests have contributed to science. In various ways, the Church has sought to affect Western attitudes of vice and virtue in diverse fields.
I'm going to deal with two topics. Number one, contribution of Indian language to English vocabulary, and number two, impact of foreign languages on English. So let's start by examining how Indian languages have influenced the English language by contributing to its vocabulary. The British colonial rule in India lasted for nearly 2 centuries, during which time English language was introduced to the region. Language assimilation often occurs when two cultures are exposed to each other over a long period of time, which led to Indian languages contributing to the English vocabulary. This contribution of Indian languages to English vocabulary can be seen in several ways. Words from Indian languages have been completely absorbed into the English language, while others have been altered to fit the linguistic limitation of English. This assimilation has resulted in a diverse and enriched English vocabulary that is used by millions of people around the world today. As a result of this linguistic exchange, Indian culture has left a lasting impact on the English language. Over the centuries, English has absorbed many words from Indian languages, particularly Hindi, Sanskrit, Tamil, Telugu, and Urdu. These Indian words have been adapted to suit the English language, reflecting the linguistic and cultural exchange that has taken place between India and the rest of the world. One of the most significant contributions of Indian languages to the English language is through the introduction of food-related vocabulary. For example, the words chai, masala, and garam masala are commonly used in English-speaking countries to describe various Indian teas and spices. Similarly, naan, roti, and papadam are popular types of Indian bread now widely consumed across the globe. The words curry, dal, and paneer are also frequently used to describe Indian cuisine and have become a staple part of the English language. In addition to food, Indian languages have also contributed to the medical field with words such as yoga, Ayurveda, and pranayama, now used to describe alternative forms of therapy and medicine. The word yoga has become synonymous with meditation and physical exercise, while Ayurveda is used to describe traditional Indian medicine. These words have become part of the global medical lexicon, representing the growing popularity and acceptance of alternative forms of medicine. One of the most prominent examples of Indian influence on English vocabulary is the word jungle, which is derived from the Hindi word jungle. The word has been used in English since the 18th century and is now an integral part of the language. Another word that has made its way into the English language is shampoo, which comes from the Hindi word champu. The word was first used in English in the mid 18th century and has since become a staple in the beauty industry. Indian spirituality and philosophy have also made significant contributions to the English language. Words such as karma, yoga, guru, and mantra are now part of the English lexicon and are now used by people all over the world. The concepts behind these words have influenced people's understanding of spirituality and self improvement. The Indian textile industry has also had a considerable impact on the English language, with words such as pajama, bandana, and khaki all originating from Indian textile traditions. The vibrant colors and intricate designs of Indian textiles have also inspired the use of words such as paisley and chintz in the English language. Indian art and culture have also contributed to the English vocabulary. The word avatar, which is commonly used in reference to computerized representation of a person, is derived from the Sanskrit word avatara, which refers to the physical manifestation of a deity on earth. Indian music has also had a considerable impact on the English language, with words such as tabla, sitar, and raga now commonly used in English-speaking countries. Furthermore, the adoption of Indian words in the English language has led to the development of new words and phrases that reflects the cultural exchange between India and the West. For example, the term Desi is used to describe people of Indian origin living outside India, while the term Bangla originated from the Hindi word Bangla. Indian languages have made a significant contribution to the English language, enriching its vocabulary and reflecting the cultural exchange between India and the rest of the world. The adoption of Indian words has helped to bridge the gap between different cultures and foster greater understanding and appreciation for the diversity of human experience. As the world becomes increasingly interconnected, the influence of Indian languages on the English language is likely to continue shaping the global lexicon for the generations to come. Moving on to the next topic, impact of foreign languages on English. It's well known that English language is a language that has been heavily influenced by the other languages throughout history. The impact of foreign languages on English can be seen in its vocabulary, grammar, and syntax. Now we are going to explore the historical and cultural factors that have shaped English into the language we know today. One of the earliest foreign languages to impact English was Latin. During the Roman occupation of Britain, Latin words and phrases entered the language. Many of these words are still in use today, such as etc., per se, and vice versa. Latin also had a profound impact on the structure of English, with many grammatical rules and conventions being derived from Latin grammar. Another major influence on English was Old Norse, which was brought to England by the Vikings. Old Norse had a significant impact on English language, particularly in the areas of grammar and vocabulary. Many Old Norse words have become commonplace in English, including egg, husband, and leg. Old Norse also influenced the syntax of English with the use of auxiliary verbs such as have and be being derived from Old Norse grammar. The Norman conquest of England in 1066 brought French to the country, and with it came a significant impact on the English language. The French influence on English can be seen in the large number of French words that have been adapted into English. Words such as chef, menu, and restaurant all are French in origin. French also had an impact on the grammar and syntax of English, with the use of definite and indefinite articles being derived from the French grammar. Another significant influence on English came from the Greek language. Greek was the language of the philosophers and scholars of the ancient world, and many Greek words have been adapted into English to describe complex concepts and ideas. Examples of Greek words that have been absorbed into English include democracy, philosophy, and psychology. In addition to these ancient languages, many modern languages have also had an impact on English. For example, Spanish has contributed many words related to food and music, such as taco, and salsa, German has contributed many words related to science and technology, such as Schnitzel and Wanderlust. Japanese has contributed many words related to technology and popular culture, such as anime and karaoke. Tamil is one of the oldest and richest languages in the world, with a history that dates back over 2000 years. Over time, the Tamil language has had a significant impact on the English language, with many Tamil words and phrases entering into common usage. As we have discussed earlier in the contribution of the English language to English vocabulary, one of the most well-known examples of Tamil influence on English is the word curry. This term originally comes from the Tamil word curry, which means sauce or relish. The word was brought to England by British colonists who had spent time in India, and it soon became a staple in British cuisine. Another example of Tamil influence on English is the word paraya. This term originally comes from the Tamil word parayar, which was used to describe members of the lowest caste in Tamil Nadu. The word was later adapted by English speakers to describe social outcasts or anyone who was shunned by society. The impact of foreign languages on English is ongoing, as new words and phrases are continually being adapted into the language. This process is essential to the vitality of English as a global language, as it helps to ensure that the language remains relevant and adaptable to changing circumstances. So, we can see that the impact of foreign languages on English has been significant throughout its history, contributing to the richness and diversity of the language we know today. From Latin to Tamil, each language has left its mark on English, and the ongoing process of adaptation and adaptation ensures that English will continue to evolve and thrive as a global language.
Let's look on the pros and cons of the influence of foreign languages on English. Just as everything else that exists in the binary of advantages and disadvantages, the influence of foreign languages on English too has its equivalent pros and cons. The influence of other languages on English has been gradually and unexplored happening since the inception of its origin, as it has been at first a language that has stemmed from Latin and Norman influence and was indeed called as Germanic language in medieval Europe. Under this section, we will explore the pros and cons of the influence of foreign languages on English, which is highly inevitable with the rapid process of globalization, which would cause the inflation of more foreign words into English. Let's look at the pros of the influence of foreign languages on English. Number one, it ensures the survival of the language as it makes the language contemporary and helps the people of the current living times to adapt into speaking English easily with their slang and colloquial terms, which aids in socialization. It proves the adaptability of the English language that has been one of the most important characteristics that makes English a global language. It makes the vernacular languages reach a wide range of audience of the majority and ensures the survival and popularity of other languages of different countries. It also depicts the homogeneous nature of English that also invites future prospects of the English language, which ensures the popularity of English. Cons of the influence of foreign languages on English. It continually tarnishes the unique nature of English that erodes the unique identity of the language. It still encapsulates the colonial nature of English. It also means slow destruction of its native, which is the Anglo-Saxon and Germanic roots, in order to accumulate and imbibe more of the other languages in order to be established as a global language and as the most receptive and absorbent language. The conclusion. While every language has its own uniqueness and degree of receptibility that denotes its greatness, certain purists are against the inflation and imbibing of the words and influences of other foreign languages. But if the inflation of language is condemned, it would turn out to be a dead language like Greek and Latin that no longer is in use because it was considered classical and therefore was desired to be untouched by other languages, though they contributed to the roots of several languages, including English. Therefore, for a language to stand the test of time and be popular and also be used widely, the language has to be receptive and adaptable to the influence of other languages that would ensure its survival.